All right, so we'll jump right into the 30 Years' War here. Again, what we'll do is to provide a background as to the events leading up to the conflict itself, the religious tensions that are beginning to boil over, and talk about the course of the war itself, the major kinds of turning points emerging during that period of time, and how there's going to be a new expression of national power through what we know to be the pursuit of national interests. So, so you remember that the Europe experienced this great deal of stress resulting from the Reformation, and even in a broader context, with things like the Black Death, the Renaissance, the discovery of the Western Hemisphere, and now the Reformation. Europe was undergoing some pretty pivotal and pretty universal types of change, disorienting change in many respects. Uh, and there would be efforts to kind of keep the peace in many respects. First and foremost, we can see this in the case of things like the pursuit of what was known as the Counter Reformation. So, that the idea that once Luther had successfully established his own separate church, and many others, as we talked about, we scoped out a few of those. Um, the papacy realized that internal reforms were now an absolute necessity, which gets us to this Counter Reformation. What were the lessons learned, and how is the church going to address the issues? In 1545, and for the next several decades until 1563, they would convene intermittently, kind of on and off, the Council of Trent, excuse me, in which Catholic bishops would gather to discuss the scope of reforms that the church should adopt. This was not done in an effort to appease Protestants, to try and bring Protestants back into the Catholic order. It was more motivated from a sense of need to instill stricter discipline within the clergy and the church as a whole. First and foremost, as a result of this Council of Trent, it was argued and believed that there would be stricter enforcement of celibacy, that Catholic priests would not be allowed to marry, and that they would have to remain celibate. That this was the official doctrine, but it had not been enforced well. And as a result of that lack of enforcement, it was believed that this was kind of leading priests astray, you might say. Also, there would be efforts to educate the clergy more thoroughly, not necessarily to enlighten, but instead to synthesize the church's message, to enforce, in many cases, conformity in spreading a uniform um, message of church doctrine. We can see this in the support for Ignatius Loyola and such, which we'll talk about in just a moment. Um, there would also be bishops that would and archbishops that would govern directly over their diocese, that there would be no more living the high life in Rome. So when you begin to escalate, climb up the professional ladder, the ranks of the church bureaucracy, in many cases, what would happen is that the bishops and archbishops, instead of remaining locally based to administer and oversee the affairs of their diocese that they were responsible for. Instead, what they would do is move to Rome, where they would continue to kind of play into and participate in papal politics. They would want to have to, if they felt the need, if they were interested, to live close to where the Pope was in order to be present and kind of be visible, in order to kind of win uh, uh, promotion to higher levels within the church hierarchy. But in the years following the Reformation and during this era of the Counter Reformation, again, the Council of Trent came to realize that um, because they were absent from overseeing and administering to their immediate diocese, this meant that it allowed time and space for heretics, again, that they considered the likes of Martin Luther to be. It allowed people like Luther to mobilize and to kind of gain support rather than to be, because there was this absence of authority in that specific area at the time it was most needed. So bishops and archbishops would be required to stay more locally um, and oversee their jurisdictions more directly. There would also be the revival of the Inquisition, something that had been going on and kind of, again, intermittently on and off again since as early as 1215. This is where you have a very kind of punitive element entering into the Catholic Church, that there would be this more aggressive weeding out, um, rooting out of any type of dissent from within the ranks of the Catholic order and the Catholic fold itself. Any dissension could bring one before the Inquisition, where really the only recourse was recanting one's ideas if they ran afoul or were challenging against the established official doctrine coming out of the church itself. And there would be also as I said, the pursuit of trying to create a more universal, standardized message coming out of the church, mainly through education. And this gets us into Ignatius Loyola and acting during his time as the head of the Jesuits. Um, it was the Jesuits who tended to the education of the clergy itself. And the Jesuits under Loyola began building a network of Catholic schools, not only across Europe, but also, kind of getting ahead and sending missionaries out to, the various corners of the world in order to spread the faith, the Catholic faith. They were bent on trying to convert Protestants as well as non-Christians worldwide to Catholicism. Again, they sponsored missionaries to try and convert populations around the globe. I talked about a couple of these in the last lecture in talking about Japan in particular, um, and also China, where Francis Xavier was an early missionary to Japan, and Matteo Ricci was a missionary sent to China. Well, they are coming from the Jesuit school of thought. So the Jesuits themselves are some of the most disciplined, die-hard Catholics, and the intellectual kind of vanguard of the Catholic Church in many respects. There would be also regional disruptions that kind of feed into and challenge the efforts to kind of keep the peace in the decades leading up to the 30 Years' War. Lutherans and Catholics within the Holy Roman Empire um, left the emperor, the Holy Roman Emperor, clinging to power, and in order to retain his title over um, and claim to authority, what the title and the crown itself within the empire. The Holy Roman Emperor, again, at this time still Charles V, agreed to what was known as the Peace of Augsburg in 1555. According to this piece, Charles V remained Catholic. He remained a Catholic head of state over a multi-religious community. He was basically the presider over not only Catholics but also Protestants within the confines of the empire itself. But at the very least, according or under the terms of this Peace of Augsburg, he recognized the right of the Lutheran Church to exist. And so, at the very minimum, Lutherans would be able to worship and practice their faith openly as a result of this agreement. He also agreed to secularize church lands. So, if there was a priest or even a bishop that began to defect from Catholicism, well, the property that was administered by that church official now was going to be up for question as far as well as does the property remain Catholic property or does it simply transition over to being a Protestant church and property because the local um, clergy is the local clergyman is now you know, no longer Catholic. Well, this agreement, the Peace of Augsburg, is going to secularize those church lands and basically say, look, we'll turn this into a state matter because the church is not going to be able to resolve this internally within itself. This also allowed German princes to choose the religious preferences for themselves and for their local principalities as well, and their subjects located within those principalities. And this applied to not only Protestants, but also Catholics as well, Catholic princes and Protestant princes. So, to a certain extent, this was very accommodating, but interestingly enough, it was only accommodating really to the Catholic, or excuse me, to the Lutheran Protestants located within the Holy Roman Empire. It did not. It failed to recognize Calvinists or Anabaptists who were also part of the Protestant movement that were, kind of occupying or existing in certain segments of the Holy Roman Empire themselves. And so the Peace of Augsburg serves as a pretty excellent example here of efforts to achieve some sort of resolution, some sort of mediation, but the times being so evolving so quickly that the terms of the agreement were not flexible enough to meet the needs and the changing circumstances that much of Europe, in this case the Holy Roman Empire, were experiencing. And that becomes characteristic of times that of stress, tension, uncertainty that were certainly prevalent during the early 17th century, or I should say, mid to late and early decades of the mid to late 16th century and early 17th century. And the Holy Roman Empire was not alone. In England, you have similar circumstances. I alluded to this at the end of the last lecture, where England was now going to suffer the effects and have to deal with the fallout from um, the reign of King Henry VIII and his moving the uh, kingdom of England outside of the Catholic Church, and the effects were felt almost from the start. Um, so, um, Mary Tudor, King Henry VIII's first child by his first wife, remember, is a Catholic by the name of Catherine of Aragon. She came to rule over England after her half brother, Edward, who was a sickly child. He ascended to the throne but died soon afterward. And as a result, he had no children of his own, no males or any children at all. And so, as a result, Mary was the one who inherited the throne after his death. She becomes Mary the First, Queen of England. She was Catholic. She was raised Catholic. She was now a Catholic presiding over a Protestant country for all intents and purposes. And during her tumultuous 5-year reign, she is going to want to stamp out Protestantism in England, ordering the persecution and killing of Protestants, earning her the nickname Bloody Mary. Mary herself did not have any children. Um, Again, it was only 5 in which she had this kind of period on the throne. And so as a result, it was Mary's half sister, Elizabeth, who was going to be next in line to inherit the throne. Now, Elizabeth was raised a Protestant. Her mother was Anne Boleyn. And so even during her half sister's reign, Elizabeth was going to have to be kind of spirited away. She was going to have to be kind of moved from household to household as a child and a young teenager, um, in order to protect her against any plots where they were trying to assassinate her or get rid of her, um, because of the persecution of Protestants under Mary the first's reign. Um, Elizabeth survives. She manages to succeed and thrive. And in 1558, she's going to inherit the crown of throne herself. And as you can see from her tenure as the sovereign of England, she is going to enjoy a rather successful period of authority. In fact, she is one of the most capable and successful monarchs in English history. One reason for this is because she was an expert politician. She took a moderate course between Protestant and Catholic factions within her own domain. She adopted some of the reforms that Protestants were calling for, specifically from within the Puritan community, those English Calvinists, as they described themselves as Puritans. They wanted to, again, purify the church, the Anglican church, removing displays of wealth and any ostentatious decoration from within the church. Um, they just thought that this was a distraction from the actual pursuit of faith and the study of Scripture. Again, some Puritans didn't think that Elizabeth went far enough, and so they chose to remove themselves from England. And eventually, as I mentioned, when I was talking about John Calvin, eventually these Puritans made their way to the North America and to the New World in the 1620s. Uh, Elizabeth, for her part, melded or tried to meld as best as possible Catholic and Protestant doctrine together into this hybrid of Anglicanism, and the Church of England and an Anglican faith. So she's willing to compromise again with regard to religious faith and the pursuit of it. She's also going to use her eligibility as an unmarried queen as a political tool as well. And this gets us more into kind of a secular type of interpretation of her political savvy. Um, and this is best represented in her efforts to rebuff, but not, at the same time not alienate the advances of a young king, the King of Spain, King Philip II. King Philip II, of course, is Catholic. He is, the product of a Catholic monarchy, Catholic family in Spain, and he was eager to seek a mate. He on several occasions asked for Elizabeth's hand in marriage, um, and Elizabeth managed to, you know, delay and kind of, keep Philip II at arm's length in those kinds of requests, because she knew that, if she did marry, then she would, first of all, potentially lose sovereignty over her own kingdom, which she enjoyed governing. But then also there would be this, kind of religious tensions, Catholicism that would have to be kind of addressed and rectified. And she, in all intents and purposes, would probably have to convert to Catholicism. But for his part, Philip II was willing to play the long game, and understood that as long as Elizabeth remained single, then first and foremost, he was unwilling and kind of reluctant to alienate her because he didn't want to burn that bridge, so to speak, as far as a potential mate was concerned. But he also knew that if she was remained a bachelorette, that she would have no legitimate offspring, and if that were the case, the once she died, the throne would pass on to her half sister, a woman by the name of Mary Stuart, better perhaps known as Mary Queen of Scots. Now, Mary Queen of Scots was a Catholic and would probably be more receptive to marrying Philip II, the King of Spain. And so, as a result, he was willing to bide his time. He was willing to kind of run out the clock on Elizabeth. Mary Stuart was less patient. She plotted against her half sister Elizabeth. She, was trying to generate a rebellion to overthrow her by force. Um, when that plot was exposed, she was put under house arrest. Mary Stuart was put under house arrest. Um, and when she continued to try and conspire with Philip II and send him letters proclaiming or um, um, uh, committing her hand in marriage to him once Elizabeth was removed, um, those letters were intercepted by Elizabeth's extensive kind of intelligence network, and they were brought to her attention. And when she learned of this, she ordered the execution of Mary, Queen of Scots, for again her persistent um, treachery and treason. When that happened, when this Protestant head of state executes a leading member, Catholic member of her own, you know, community, her own population in England, this is going to upset not only Philip, who is Catholic, but also the Pope. And so, as a result, Philip is going to seek retribution, and he sends the bulk of his Spanish fleet, the Spanish Armada, to pick up Spanish troops that were fighting to put down a rebellion in the Spanish-held Netherlands, and take those troops and invade England with them. This all happens in 1588, or the plan is put into effect in 1588. Interestingly, Elizabeth, for her part, had been supporting the rebels that were fighting against Philip II and against Philip's forces in the Netherlands. Again, that was kept as secret as possible. But by May of 1588, the Spanish Armada was in the English Channel, that narrow waterway between England and France, and they were making their way to the Netherlands to pick up the troops. In May of that year, the English small fleet that it was, much smaller ships, but they were more maneuverable, which was crucial during this engagement, were able to defeat the larger, more formidable Spanish Armada itself. Again, the Spanish at this period of time were the leading European power. And they had a massive fleet of ships at their disposal. Again, they basically ruled the waves with regard to their monopoly for lack of a better word, in the New World. They were extracting massive amounts of wealth and being rather profitable when it came to that. And so Spain was, the um, top dog in the balance of power of Europe. But that changed in 1588, in May of 1588, when the Spanish, excuse me, when the English managed to defeat and basically destroy about half of the entire Spanish fleet itself. That was done not only by the English ships, but also by Mother Nature. A series of storms just ruined the Spanish fleet as well. And only half of the ships that set out from Spain made it back to the safety of Spain, not having destroyed this English fleet and not having invaded England. Uh, and this event in 1588 really marked the zenith of Spanish imperial power. From then on, Spain was going to be a power in decline. So, turning attention back to continental Europe, we are now going to kind of zero in on the Holy Roman Empire and its serving as the ground zero for what becomes known as the 30 Years' War. So, again, the Holy Roman Empire had served as ground zero for religious turmoil, for the Protestant Reformation itself, and for much of the religious turmoil that was going to follow. You'll remember that the emperor was really an elected official. He was chosen by 7 of the most powerful German princes within the Holy Roman Empire itself. Um, After the Reformation, 3 of the 7 officials were Lutheran in their religious affiliation, and the 4 remaining officials, princes and others, were uh, Catholic. By 1613, however, 2 of the 3 Lutheran princes had converted from Lutheranism to Calvinism, officially a religion that was not recognized by the Holy Roman Emperor or recognized within the empire as an official kind of sanctioned religion. By 1617, Archduke Ferdinand became the King of Bohemia, which you can see by this map, and it's maybe a good time to explain this map just briefly here. The Kingdom of Bohemia is here in this purple section. The purple here, and you can get a sense of this from the legend of the map, are predominantly Catholic areas of Europe. Um, and so uh, the Archduke Ferdinand, who is going to become the head of state, um, the King of Bohemia, is Catholic, and he's going to begin to um, curtail the rights and the political freedoms of Protestants within the Kingdom of Bohemia itself. Now, zooming out a bit here, you can see just how complex the religious expressions were within the um, Holy Roman Empire here. I mean, the orange sections here are Lutheranism, of the Lutheran faith. You have, um, pockets of uh, Catholicism surrounded by areas of Lutheranism. You have pockets of, Lutheranism that were, kind of outside of the, or not sharing kind of a contiguous space or border with the predominant areas of Lutheranism. So it was very confused as far as religious loyalty was concerned. And you can tell by the kind of close association of communities that are, you know, um, have very different views as far as religious faith are concerned, how, if religious tensions were to escalate, which they did, how this is going to prove to be kind of a tinderbox when it comes to any type of, you know, everlasting peace or the potential for conflict to erupt in those areas. Uh, Archduke Ferdinand's coming to power in the Kingdom of Bohemia is going to, in some cases, kind of light a slow fuse that's going to result in that conflict. By the very next year, 1618, the Peace of Augsburg here was beginning to fall apart. Although it recognized, of course, the right of Lutherans